Welcome to episode 2 of Asking the Why, the series where we're looking at questions that matter to millennial Christians today. I'm your host and producer, Caleb.
And I'm your host, James. So we're really excited to get to our second episode. We're also really thankful for all of you that watched our first episode. Now, if you didn't get a chance to watch it a couple of weeks ago when we went live, or in the couple of weeks since then, you can still go back through our Facebook page and find the video and watch it. And it's also on our website. We'll drop a link to that in the video description. Now, for this episode, we're looking at the topic, how the church can approach singleness.
Yeah, and I think in church today, there's almost this expectation on us young people to go from youth to young adults to young married couples to young families. And if you don't quite fit into that mold, we can feel excluded. So on this topic of singleness, James and I probably aren't the best people to speak into it. I got married at 20.
And I was just turned 22 when I got married. So we have no authority, we have no grounds to speak into this topic whatsoever. So for that reason, we've caught up with Kimberly Smith. And Kimberly is a pastor and a speaker and an author, and she's written a book called What We Cannot Be Alone, which looks all about how the church can approach singleness.
And I think our conversation went really well. It was very insightful. One of the things that she said that I really got a lot out of was when she talked about the church being this place that should be the most inclusive place on earth. But sometimes due to different practices, different mentalities, different points of view, it cannot seem that way sometimes.
Yeah, so let's check out the video. Now, just before we start, you don't have to be single to actually get something from this video. Whether you're married or single or young or old, even if you're just part of a church, hopefully there's something in this video that will actually encourage you. And while you're watching it, if you've got any thoughts or comments or questions, drop them in the comments of the video below. We'd love to see you all engaging with it that way.
Great, yeah, well, let's go there now.
Hi, and welcome to this episode. I'm joined here by Kimberly Smith. Kimberly is a pastor and an author and a speaker, and we're going to have a bit of a chat today about singleness and kind of how that plays out in the church. So welcome, Kim.
Thanks, great to be here.
My experience of church has been that it's been a very family-dominated environment. Is that something that you've experienced as well?
Yeah, definitely, and so it should be. The church is, God's family to start with, but then also that picture of family is something that I think we're meant to champion as church. And if people stop being family, the world ceases to be populated, and that's a problem too. So we're all for family, and I think that's a necessary and important function of the church.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is great, but then I'm guessing there's people that don't necessarily fit into that dynamic.
Yeah, for sure. And if you don't, it can be quite isolating because there's a whole lot of things that tie into that narrative that most people are not conscious of, particularly if they've experienced it themselves and that's the lens they look at life through. But if you find yourself not doing the grow up, get married, have kids, who grow up and get married and have kids, and then you're a grandparent and then you die, and everyone lives happily ever after. If you don't experience that, or if you don't fit into that story, you can just feel really quite excluded, or perhaps even that there's something a little wrong with you, or just sort of pushed to the margins.
Yeah. Now, I've got to admit that's not been my experience. I did the kind of very good kind of Australian Christian thing. I was married by 22 and my wife was 21, both grown up in churches, those kind of things. But what about you? What about your story? Have you had any experience in this kind of issue?
Well, so I've had both. I've had two kinds of experiences. The first is yours.
Yep.
I was 20 when I was married and was married for 8 years. That was a pretty destructive and unhealthy relationship that ended. And so I find myself what I would term a single again. So I guess for me, I sit in a fairly unique place where I have experienced both sides of that. And as a pastor, as a leader, I've witnessed that in others, but also journeyed that myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that we've got people like you that have got that experience, because one of the things we're seeing, and I think that you mentioned before, is that there are these people that get that little bit excluded because churches seem to be focused so much about finding your partner, getting married, moving on, continuing on. So what are some of the issues that face these singles, these people that don't necessarily fit that kind of picture-perfect family mould?
Yeah. Well, I guess, the church as a family, the church as an organisation ought to be one of the most inclusive places you'll ever find. That's our message is love.
Yeah.
And so it should be our experience. And it just cannot be. And I think a lot of it, the phrase I like to use is we don't know what we don't know. And so there's a lot of leaders most leaders are married. Most people who are on the platform are married, and they probably don't even realise some of the language that they use. It could be that events are advertised as, you know, per couple pricing, which indicates that we're not expecting singles to come, or it could be just an emphasis on families in terms of attending events. Church itself is very family centric in terms of we've got kids ministry, we've got options for you as parents, and so we speak to parents a lot in that. But the experience of it, I think, is it feeds into an unhealthy sense of I'm doing something wrong, or there is something wrong with me if I don't fit this normal narrative. There can be social isolation that happens because couples tend to gravitate towards couples, and singles of similar age can find themselves excluded. I think that happens too with even for couples who don't have children at the same stage as their friends are having children. And that's a little bit natural because we gravitate to like. But if you're like me and you're a person of advancing years and all of my friends, literally all of my friends in my peer group in a church may be married with children, but the singles are 22-year-olds, that's not my demographic. So I think that can be an unhelpful experience too, is just finding your people in a church if you don't fit those sort of stages of transition.
Yeah, absolutely. So then thinking about, for a lot of people, it's during that kind of young adult age, or when they fit into the young adult ministry. So you're at uni, perhaps you've got, you know, your first job or two after uni. You're kind of that 18 to 30-year-old age group. I'm guessing, and I can even remember back to being in that space, it was very focused, sometimes even quite overtly, about finding the partner and getting married. About, you know, you're always, you know, there's 15 weddings this year that you'll be going to because your peer group are all getting married at the same point. So, I mean, you've touched a little bit about how this kind of impacts those people that don't necessarily fit that, but what kind of happens to these people that don't necessarily find their partner by age 24, 25?
Yeah. Well, for some and for most, and it's possible for all, we can actually live quite fulfilled lives as a single. I know, hold the phone. That there is, you know, I mean, that for many single people of that age, if it weren't for the pressure, the external pressure, they'd actually probably be feeling like that they're doing okay. But there can be, like, they're very helpful people. Oh, are you okay without a partner? And sort of vibe that gets the language that gets spoken into that, or the pressure that gets put on them. But I think what we need to do as church leadership, and also those who are around singles in our church communities, is to be just checking our language, checking those assumptions that we're making, checking that we're not in any of our actions or any of our words inferring that we think those people might be less than. A 26-year-old single person can also lead worship. Like there should be no barrier to their capacity to serve, to lead, to be, you know, connecting in. They can be in kids ministry even if they don't have kids. You know, there's a whole lot of I think we tend to put a bit of a few filters on that shouldn't be there in the way that we perceive or engage with single people. And also I would say that every single person is different. Every single person is different. That in the way we experience our singleness, and that can be seasonal, it can shift very quickly depending what's happening around us. But there's just no one size fits all. So there's no point going into a church and saying, from now on, can you just do this, say that, and be that? You know, here's your 3 steps to making singles happy. You know, like it just fix everything. Because the reality is every single person will be having walking a different journey and experiencing that differently. So some are completely okay with their singleness. So for some, it's not until later in life that they kind of pop up out of, you know, work and uni and career development and travel and all these things, and kind of go, oh wait, I'm single. Like this is not what I thought it would, you know, I was going to be, or now what do I do with this? For others, you know, from 19 years onwards, they're next minute, you know, when's it coming, when's it happening? I've sat with young adults, you know, 21, 22, who literally feel like they've missed out. You know, I'm 23, what's happened? I've been left on the shelf. And I just sit there and try not to take that personally. But I think we just need to be very careful as churches and as people in community with single people, that we're not making generalisations about all singles. Everyone will have a different story to tell.
We've identified that the church is often missing these people, and obviously that's going to lead to things like a sense of isolation, a sense of disconnectedness.
Mm-hmm.
Is there other things that we kind of need to be aware of what our unconscious actions might be doing to these people, or making these people feel?
Yeah, for sure. The thing that I would say is my strongest experience personally as an extroverted person, as an external processor, living alone and being alone is actually not my healthiest state. So for some, that's not true. You know, they're introverted, they enjoy that, they get energized by being alone. I get turned insane by being alone. As I say, different experiences for different people. But I think one of the gifts the church can be is to provide that sense of relational connection, those places for external processing, that energizing from being with others.
Yeah.
The church family broadly has a gift to give to singles in that sense. And beyond that, whether you're extroverted or introverted, this is true for everyone, is that we actually need intimate relationships.
Yep.
We need relationships of closeness. So not just, wave and high type relationships. The upside of the challenges of marriage is that it's a very refining relationship. So a couple that, they kind of rub the edges off each other a little bit. There's a little bit of conflict and there's misalignment and you've got to work things out. For single people, we actually need that sort of tension in our life to refine us too, because that's what God uses to make us holy, is to teach us patience and tolerance and compromise and understanding and empathy and all those things that I can't learn by myself. Although I am very impatient with myself, but to be in relationship with other people is where I'm going to develop my character. And so again, a gift that the church family gets to be will be those people who call you out on stuff and give you safe places to process things. Teach you how to relate, how to trust, how to feel included and to have that sense of belonging that we all crave.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's some really great ideas about what churches should be doing or need to be doing. But let's get practical for a minute if we can. How can we, not just as churches, as a nameless group, but as individuals, how do we actually help look out for people that might otherwise be slipping through the cracks in our churches? They might be in our friendships group and we might just have never thought about it because we might be married or we might have a partner and we might just not have processed what that actually means for them. What can we be doing?
Or you may have even tried something and been brutally rebuffed by a single, because that's possible too, where you've got, hey, how do you feel? Shut up, back off. But I think the number one thing is, if you have single people in your life, is to ask them. Because as I said, and keep repeating, it's so personalised and individualised. That what you learn from me about singleness might not apply to your friend, and so as useful as it is for me to raise the conversation, that's really all I can do, is maybe alert you to some things that then you could ask, because that person's experience is going to be completely different than my own. So I think we need to be a little bit more comfortable having the uncomfortable conversation. This could be a bit awkward, but can you tell me, are there times when I say stuff that's really unhelpful to you? Or in this situation, how could I be more helpful to you? My experience, my senior pastor saying, I want to preach about divorce and remarriage and marriage, help me understand how I can do that in a way that's sensitive to you. What kind of language would be more or less helpful, so that we get empowered to sort of shape our own destiny, I guess, in that sense, because rather than waiting to see if you find that out, you're drawing that out of us. And so we get to communicate, actually, I need people who will help me externally process. Someone else doesn't need me, leave me alone, I'll decide for myself. Some people are completely comfortable with being introduced to, I've got a single friend, come over for dinner. Like, personally, I'm okay with that, but I know people who would be horrified or absolutely mortified to show up at your house and there's some guy standing, hi, I'm Bill. But, when we go out places, is it weird for you if it's all couples and just you, or would you feel more excluded if we didn't include you? But again, every person will have a different experience of that, depending who they are and how they fit in that social circle. But the assumptions we make can be so hurtful.
Yeah.
You know, I've been in conversations where you hear that they've gone out together and, oh, we didn't invite you because it was just all couples. And you're like, did you check that?
Yeah.
Was that because you were going to feel awkward, or did you think I was going to feel awkward? Because it could be either. And sometimes even the things we do out of sensitivity or thinking we're helping can be really not helping. Yeah, and particularly if we're not articulating what we're doing or why we do it, because those assumptions again come into play and they're not helpful.
Yeah.
I think, you know, for me, I love being invited into spaces where my friends who have children, because I don't have my own children, but I love children.
Yeah.
So I love the opportunity to be interacting with kids. I like being invited into places where there are men, because, you know, so my girlfriends who are married can kind of offer me safe interactions with males, and I appreciate that. I like it when I'm given the opportunity to hang out in really normal kind of environments, not just let's get dressed up and go out, or let's pull out the fancy silverware, but just come over as you are, find us as we are, bring your slippers, you know, we're all just going to be watching MasterChef or whatever. The laundry's going to be piled on the kitchen table. You know, this is just life. Come and join in with that. Again, other people might find that really offensive. You know, you come over and it's like, you didn't even clear the table. Like, who do you think I am? You know, so I keep coming back, that individualized, personalized, you know, finding that custom fit for the people in your world. But then I think, if you have a single friend that's in your group, you get to advocate on their behalf as you get to know them better. And I think that's really powerful as well. I just recently had a girlfriend call me again. Anytime there's an event, she'll ring me and ask if I want to arrive with them, like drive, you know, to the party or to the thing with them, because I hate arriving somewhere alone. Like it's actually a really difficult transition to make, to walk into an active social environment and not know where you fit. So to come in with somebody is actually just a really generous but very simple gift to, you know, chuck someone in the back seat and just let them come along with you. You know, just some really simple offerings that I think we can all be better at. And singles can do this for other singles too. This is not just we singles need you marrieds to rescue us. You know, help, we're single.
And that's not the dynamic we were trying to put forward by any sense.
So singles are about making family for each other as well. Like, this is on all of us, but I think it's about asking the questions.
And I think that's absolutely fantastic that, the more we start to ask these questions, like I said, then, you know, the couples can actually be the advocates for their friends. You know, if that dynamic isn't being looked at in church, they can actually be the ones that stand up and go, hey, you haven't thought about how this might impact people. And especially going back to, you know, the church should be that place where everyone is included, everyone is invited, no one is turned away because of any kind of status or position or anything like that.
And anytime we have to advocate for ourselves, it's always a little bit inky, you know, like it's a bit kind of like, excuse me, what about me? And so I love that idea of advocating for others, and because I think it just gets to be a really genuine question of care and concern rather than a whingy, whiny, you know, please cater to me because I'm sad person kind of story. And so I think it's a good thing. That I love that idea of the advocacy here.
That's awesome. Look, now I think that's been a really encouraging chat. So Kim has actually written a book about singleness in the church. We'll have details about that kind of in the video description down below. But this is not where the chat's going to end. We're actually going to talk in a second video about kind of singleness and how that relates personally. So if you are single, you know, we've talked about how the church can kind of help, or what the church needs to look out for, but you know, what we can be doing if you are single, if you find yourself in that position. What can you actually do to make sure that your faith stays on track, you don't get isolated from the church and those sorts of things? But Kim, thank you for sharing with us. It's been an absolute privilege to chat with you and kind of talk these things over.
No worries.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Asking the Why. Now, this is actually part one of our conversation with Kim. We'll be back next episode going to part two of her talk around singleness.
So Kimberly and I continued our chat, and we went and talked at a bit more of a personal level. So looking at, you know, what about me? What if I'm single? What are some of the issues that might be facing me in my life, in my faith? And what are some of the things that might help with that?
So be sure to like the Why My Facebook page or subscribe to our YouTube channel, and yeah, you'll be notified when that next episode is up.
And if you'd prefer to engage with these by podcast instead of watching the video, if you head to our website, we do have an audio podcast available of each of our episodes. And in the podcast, we do have a little bit extra content. We're able to go a little bit deeper into this topic with our guests. So head to our website and check that out if that's how you'd like to listen.
And we will see you next time.